Today on Smacky's Garage, we're going to be replacing the spark plugs on my 2018 F-150. Now this truck is a Gen 3 5 liter. I have about 83,000 miles on it, and I'm starting to notice a little bit of a stumble while driving down the road. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do some preventative maintenance or some routine maintenance, and we're going to take these spark plugs out. We're going to compare them to the new ones that I'm putting in. We're going to test them on the bench, and then we're going to install them in the truck, and then see if it makes the driving any better. So let's go ahead, let's get into the video. All right, now spark plugs on this truck, pretty easy. There really isn't too much to it. Each one of the coil packs has a connector on it, and then there is a bolt that's holding the coil pack into the valve cover. After we take that out, we should just be able to pull the coil pack out by hand and then use a wrench or a socket, I think it's 5/8, to take the spark plug out. Now, there really is pretty good access to all of them. The driver's side is much easier than the passenger side. The driver's side is all clear and open. Passenger side, I believe you have the high pressure fuel pump in there. So you gotta work a little bit in a tighter space, but it's all perfectly doable. It's not too bad of a project. Now let's go ahead and let's start taking some of the plugs out. Now, unless you're really tall, you will need something to stand on to be able to get to the plugs. Now, the other thing I'm gonna recommend is before you do this, just blow everything off. Just make sure that there's no crap around it that's gonna fall into the cylinders when you're taking the plugs out. So let's go ahead and look at the engine and start taking it apart. All right, so in the engine, you can see the coil plugs are right there. There's gonna be 8 of them. You have a V8. Now looking down it, there's 4 in here. Looking down the truck, I mean, you're gonna have to reach over things to get to it. So that's why having something to stand on is important. And then in this, you can see the connector there. You can see the 8mm bolt that you need to take out, and you're gonna have to take out all of them down there. So what we're gonna go ahead and do, we're gonna start with this driver's side because it's nice and easy. We're gonna take everything out. Then we're gonna move over to the passenger side where things are a little bit more complicated. Now, a little bit more complicated, but you can see we need to remove that foam there to take that out. We're gonna have to just work around a few things here, but all is doable. It's not too bad. Let's go ahead and start with the driver's side. All right, so now that I'm up here, I can take, this. We're gonna work on this one here just to demonstrate it, just because it's in an easy location. So all I gotta do is take out this 8mm bolt, which you can see really isn't in there too bad. So as soon as that is out, we're gonna go ahead and take out the connector. And we should just be able to pull this coil pack straight out. Eight millimeter out. Connectors right here. I'm gonna push down. So for the connector, I'm going to pull down on it so that it slides out. And I should just be able to pull this out. Then after it's out, you can see even with 80,000 miles and in Massachusetts winters, where everything gets corroded, this is still spinning pretty freely. So I should just be able to pull this out. Maybe it takes 2 hands. Yep, 2 hands, but coil pack is out, and now we can go ahead and get the plug. So for the spark plug, we're gonna use this 5/8 socket, just stick it right in. You gotta use a spark plug wrench on these. And then twist, and you can see even on a colder engine, it's not in there that tight. So go ahead and take this all the way out. There we go, plug is out. Now, one of the things that I like to do before I go on and do any of the other plugs is I like to look at it, make sure that the plug that I'm replacing it with is the same. So these are the LTR6IX-11s, stock number 6509. And I just want to check it dimensionally and the threads just to make sure everything's the same before I start pulling it out and changing things, because worst case scenario, you don't want to end up having something you can't put back in. So the other thing that I like to do with these is check out what the gap is. So we're going to check the stock gap compared to what the gap here is. So the gap that's left on the stock one is like 62,000. So I'll have to look up what OEM is and I'll put it on the screen. And then this one here from NGK, which probably has to be changed because it does look different, is around 48 thousandths. So looking at these two, obviously one of them needs to be changed. Either this is worn up or this one needs to be opened more. So looking at the spark plugs and doing some research on what the gap should be, the gap should be 0.052 inches, where this one is 0.06 3. So this is definitely worn in pretty well after 83,000 miles. Now, I will check all the other plugs and I will let you know exactly what gaps they're at, and I'll have a record of it just so that we can look at it. All right, I did pick up this cool little tool here which lets you see the spark plugs and actually see the spark, so we can compare the spark on that larger gap to the smaller gap and see how it's actually performing. So I'm going to see if this works in the little bit of light that we have. So not exactly 100% sure if the mic's picking that up, but you can definitely tell that the newer plug is a lot more consistent in the noise that it's making. And I'm relating that to, it is giving a cleaner spark because it's a newer plug, cleaner spark. I could see this being part of the problem why I've been getting a little bit of a stumble. Interesting to see how worn these out. I mean, it is 83,000 miles, so it is a lot of miles. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do the driver's side myself because there's no complications with that. Then I'll show you how to do the passenger side. So let's go ahead, jump through the driver's side, then go to the passenger side. All right, now to prep this side, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this piece of foam off and I'll put it back in after. But it's supposed to keep, I think, the fuel pump quieter. This makes a good amount of noise. It does have a clip on it that's holding it in place. Now, as we're going ahead and look at this side, you have 1 there, 2 there. Number 3 looks a little bit different, and we'll pull it out so you can see it. And then number 4 way in the back. So it's going to be the same process except for the third one in here, which does look different. I believe the high pressure fuel pump is in the way. So with that one, you can see that it's not the same design. There is a plug that's going into the top of the coil, and then it's coming off to the side of it. So I'll be able to talk through that one as soon as I get it off. All right, so now for what's different on this side. So you have this connector here, which I did remove because with that in place, you can't get the coil pack out unless you start disconnecting other things. And then to show this one that's different back here, I disconnected the wire from the coil, and then you can just pull on it up and it just comes out. So this one, number 3 on the side, is a completely different design, meant to get around what looks like the high pressure fuel pump down there. So now that those are out, all I have to do is take them out just as I would normally on the other side, and then we can go ahead and take a look at all the plugs. All right, so we have all 8 of the plugs out. We're gonna go ahead and look, see exactly where we ended up. And you can see they're pretty much all out of spec now. I believe it's supposed to be a max of 0.051 or 0.052. Everything is over 0.06, so they're pretty high. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna install the other ones at the preset gap and see how long they last. Now, for the new ones, I'm gonna check the gap in all of them before I install them. So the 2 things I'm gonna do to the plug before I install it, I'm gonna put some anti-seize here, and then I'm gonna put some dielectric grease over here. This will help, both will help install it, plus provide benefits, no corrosion, plus the dielectric grease will help add a little bit more resistance to it, but it'll also make it easier to install. So let's go ahead, I'm gonna add the anti-seize, then I'm gonna put everything back together. Now the stock gap on the truck is 0.049 to 0.053. It's really up to you what you wanna run for a spark plug gap. For me, I'm gonna try to get them as close to OEM as possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and gap my plugs, and I'm gonna go ahead and put them on the truck. If you're gonna gap them, be careful with them, make sure you don't do any damage to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get all these back in the truck, and then we'll talk about the torque specs to get them tightened down. So as you're going ahead and doing this, each one of these needs to be torqued down. It's about 128 inch-pounds. I'm doing it by hand because I'm used to it, but this is one of the times where it does pay off to be able to do a lot of this by hand and by feel, because it's really hard to get a torque wrench in there, but it is doable. So all these are getting torqued down, or about right to where they should be, and then we'll go ahead and put the coil packs back on. Now with this side, make sure you put everything back that you took out. So you have this connector here that we took out. We're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna press this back into the place back there, and then you just need to make sure all your electrical connections are tight. So you can see one of these connections missing here. All I have to do is put it in and then push this in. So now it is locked in place. All I gotta do is tighten everything up, then we'll take it for a drive, see how everything does. All right, gonna start it off, make sure there's no codes, everything looks okay. Sounds normal. Just as loud as it usually is. but not running rough, so I think we're okay. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it out for a drive it for a week, and then I'll let you know my impressions of what's changed. Now, after driving around the truck for about a week now, I think one of the key things that came out of this video is make sure you check your plugs, because changing them solved a lot of the noises that I had on my truck. Looking at the gap that was left between the plugs, really should have been changed out much earlier. The truck is performing significantly better. The engine's making less noise. So after 83,000 miles, much too long on the stock plugs. If I would do it again, I'd probably do it in the 40 to 50,000 mile range, just to see how much of a degradation there is from that gap and on that electrode. So I think that's one of the key things that I'm taking away from this. You know, sometimes the plugs last for 60 to 100,000 miles before they need to be changed. The OEM ones did not, which is completely fine, but it's something that I should have checked much earlier. Overall, changing the plugs made a significant difference in my F-150. Thanks for tuning in this week on Smackey's Garage. I'll see you next time.